just to everybody. It was such a good time and so glad to be back. As you see on the screen, a couple of weeks ago while I was here, as a part of our Biblical Hero series that we're finishing up today as kind of the end of the summer, school starts, the students are going to groan, right? We looked at the life of King Solomon, and in particular, we looked at the highs and the lows, right, that came to define his life. And as we looked at his life in 2 weeks, we noted, right, that wisdom was a significant part of his entire life through and through. If anything, we might be able to say that wisdom is the most significant characteristic of Solomon's life. That's the thing upon everything which was built, right? After all, it was because he asked God for wisdom that God was so happy that he gave him Sobies. If you were here for that, you know what that means. It was because of wisdom that his fame grew to legendary status. It was because of wisdom that he became so rich. And most unfortunately, it was because of his lack of wisdom that his life ended so horribly. Now, through it all, if you might have noticed, though Solomon's wisdom is referred to over and over and over again, there's actually only one recorded instance where we get to see this grand and legendary wisdom at work. In the text that Minjun just read for us is the only time where we see Solomon flex his wisdom muscles, if you will, and show us just how wise he really was. And as you just read, man, what an example, right? Like, that's crazy. And so to wrap up the summer, before we head into the fall, by the way, next week we're starting a series on the life of Abraham, right? So we're going to be in Genesis for quite some time. As we wrap up the summer, I thought it was wholly appropriate to look at the wisdom of Solomon. Because for me, if wisdom is something that makes God so happy that he's overjoyed and just kind of overrushes with gladness, I think it's worth looking at wisdom and the role that it might play in our lives. Would you agree? So, here's the game plan. Here's how we're going to do things. Simple. What is wisdom? Why is it important? When do we need it? Where do we find it? And then how do we get it once we've found it? Okay, we're just going to break it down pretty simple, fairly academic, but hopefully you'll be able to track. I think it's going to be good. What is it? Why do we need it? When do we need it? Where do we find it? And how do we get it? Let's break this down, shall we? What is wisdom? Let's first begin by defining wisdom. Now, there is a dictionary definition of wisdom, of course, but I think the best way to define wisdom is to kind of differentiate between knowledge and wisdom, right? That's kind of how we understand things, okay? And generally speaking, in my opinion, in culture and society, I think most people are okay with defining these two terms this way to know the difference. Knowledge is the information that we gain either through experience and or reasoning, right? You experience something. Students, you go to school, you learn stuff, you experience it, you learn it, or you're thinking through things, kind of, tossing it in your mind, and after a little while, you gain knowledge, right? Wisdom is the ability to understand and therefore apply the knowledge that you've gained, whether through experience and or reason. Therefore, knowing what is right and best and things of that nature. So, in summary, knowledge is the stuff that you know, and wisdom is knowing how to use the stuff that you know, if you want to put it simply. Now, I think this is a great place to start as it pertains to knowledge and wisdom. And I think even with biblical wisdom, you can apply this definition to it, and it's not that big of a deal. But the more you look into wisdom, and particularly in the Old Testament, you find that wisdom is defined differently than this. The Hebrew word for wisdom that you find most in the Old Testament basically means training. To come underneath the authority of someone and then therefore receive that authority and the training and then apply it in your life. If you ever played sports or played music or whatever, if you've endured any kind of training in your life, this is wisdom. You have a coach. That coach knows more than you about the thing that you're learning, whether it's soccer here in this example, or football, piano, violin, whatever it is. And then you learn from that coach, and then you apply the things that you learn in your training, and then your wisdom, therefore, is revealed. So wisdom, therefore, is not something that you learn and apply. Wisdom is submitting, therefore, to a greater and higher authority, and then receiving the training from that authority, and then applying it in your life, and then living it out. Now, the reason why I want to define wisdom this way, and I think it's critical, is because of this. What we are being told, if wisdom is this, training and authority and submission, then what we're being told, and we cannot miss, this is critical, is that no one on their own is naturally wise. A lot of smart people in the room, none of you are naturally wise, and therefore, none of you has your own wisdom. It doesn't exist. Let that sink in for a little bit. There are so many smart people in this room, so much smarter than me. I'm not insulting you. I think this is a biblical truth. Okay? Let me rephrase. What the Bible is telling us about wisdom is simply this. No one is inherently wise because no one's wisdom is their own. Right? Unlike the traditional definition of wisdom and knowledge that we said, with that, if you have the knowledge, it's generally assumed that one can apply that knowledge and figure out how to then be wise. But here, what the Bible is telling us simply does not work this way. Wisdom must be given and therefore received because no one, including wise Solomon, naturally has it. If you remember what he says in the beginning of his reign as king, he says this in chapter 3, verse 9. So give your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, to discern between good and evil. I don't have wisdom. God, you got to give it to me. This isn't Solomon just asking for wisdom. This is him admitting that he does not have it. And while it may seem obvious, if Solomon could get wisdom on his own, he would not have asked for it. So wisdom is the training that we receive from the outside because we submit to a higher authority. Now, if this is wisdom, then I think it leads to an even more important realization. And it's this. That when it comes to wisdom, then the question to ask is not whether someone is wise or foolish, but the question we must ask is whose wisdom is that person using? Do you see the difference? Whose wisdom is that person operating from? And determining whether that wisdom is actually wise or whether it's foolish. Basically what we're saying is everyone is wise to somebody, but is your wisdom really wise is one way to put it. One of the things that the Bible makes clear is that there are multiple wisdoms, or better, multiple sources of wisdom. If you looked at verse 28 that we just read, basically we hear that when Israel heard the judgment that Solomon put down, they recognized and they were in awe of Solomon. Why? Because he had the wisdom of God to administer justice. Long passage, but in 1 Corinthians 18:24, I'll read it for you. It says this, and pay attention to the distinctions the scripture is making in between wisdoms. For the word of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to those who are being saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise. Notice the possession, wisdom of this, and the cleverness of the clever I will set aside. Then he goes on, where is the wise man? Where is the scribe? Both wise people. Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not come to know God, God was well pleased through the foolishness of the message preached to save those who believe. For indeed, Jews ask for signs and Greeks search for wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified. To Jews a stumbling block, to Gentiles foolishness, but to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. Long passage. In summary, Paul is making clear there are multiple wisdoms. And there's a difference between them. There's a difference between the wisdom of the world and the wisdom of God. And clearly they're not equal. Choose the wrong one and you die. Choose the right one and you get life eternal. Choose the wrong one, you don't know God. Choose the right one and you're saved and you become one of his people, no matter where you come from, Jew or Greek. But you also have to understand kind of the subtle thing Paul is trying to say here. Another thing he's trying to tell us is that it is entirely possible, actually better, it is probable, most likely you and I on our own will not know which the wise one is. We have to be very careful with the wisdom that we pick. Because it isn't easy to tell which wisdom is actually wise and or foolish. But the stakes, Paul makes it clear, is sky high. It's a life and death type of thing for all of eternity, if you will. So what is wisdom? Wisdom is the training that we receive from the authorities out there, the authorities that are not all alike. And if we are not careful, we will very easily or probably choose the wrong ones to grave and terrible consequences. And make no mistake, everyone has a wisdom. It's just determining which one you have and whether it's wise or not. So, question, whose wisdom are you being trained by and living by? Well, then this naturally leads us to the next question. Why is wisdom important? Well, if you are following, it's critically important because it's a life or death type of thing. The stakes are sky high. Like wisdom isn't some nice thing, by the way, that you can have. I play Madden, and NBA 2K and College Football 25. I still play video games. Yes, I'm 40. I play video games. I admit it. But one of the things in those games that you find in every other video game is since like everyone gets a badge, right? You can like earn badges. Wisdom's not a badge. It's not like, oh, cool, I have a wisdom badge. No. Everyone has it. It's just, do you have the right one or the wrong one? And wisdom is critical because in the example that we see, Solomon with the two women, right? Bad wisdom in this case means a child dies and then one is not a mother and the other one is a mother. So it's really, really important, the kind of wisdom. Wisdom is absolutely critical. Again, life and death critical. But you might wonder, well, Pastor Pete, okay, life is critical in those ways with the big, grand questions of life. But what about in situations where the stakes aren't so sky high? Thankfully, our lives aren't all this eternity, life and death kind of stuff. We have much smaller daily life situations. Is wisdom important there, you might ask? Or you might say, if I've settled the big question of life, whether I'm saved and or not, then is wisdom really important? Or is the wisdom to know that I'm saved or wisdom to know that I'm following God and therefore have life in Him, is that enough? Or do I need more? Do I need it all the time? And the answer, I hope you will see, is yes, you need it all the time. Here's why. Next question. When do you need wisdom? Let me ask you a question. Have you ever faced this situation in your life? Have you ever faced a situation where no matter what you do, no matter how much time you spend, no matter how much you rack your brain, the decision that you need to make, the right decision, just doesn't seem to exist? Have you been in that situation before? Right? You researched it. You weighed it out, pros and cons. You did all that. You made a list. Maybe you asked some other people, smart people, for their opinion. Then you run the formula in your mind over and over and over again until you feel like you're going crazy. And then even after all of that, there doesn't seem to be a right answer. Nothing seems good or best. Have you been in that situation? Let me give you a couple examples. And again, I apologize if I'm going to stress you out, but we got to. Junior high kids, do you take CAP or regular? High school kids, regular classes or AP classes? Do I go to this college or that college? Maybe a little older. Do I date this person or do I not date this person or do I date this other person maybe? A little older maybe. Do I take this job or do I not take this job? Do I take that job or not? Do I stay here or do I move? Do I move to another city? Do I stay home? Do I change jobs? So on and so forth. Do I buy this car or that car? This house or that house? The list of these types of things goes on and on and on and on. Have you ever faced a situation like this before? Probably have. And if you haven't, I'm sorry to break it to you. The older you get, I can guarantee you, more of these types of decisions, they get more difficult and complex as they go, and the stakes just seem to continually rise. Can I get an amen from the older people in the room? Right? That's how life works. This is why, by the way, for some of the adults in the room that don't know this term, this is why adulting is a difficult thing for our young people. Because adulting is full of these types of decisions. So when do we need wisdom? I hope you agree. All the time, literally. But let's dive a little deeper because the situation gets worse. Want to know a frightening fact? I don't know why I asked you the question. You're going to see it anyway. But here's a frightening fact. There's never been a people group in the history of the world, like today in the developed Western first world, who need wisdom more than we do. Fact. You might be like, whoa, Pastor Pete, that's a little bold. Hear me out. The reason why I believe this is a fact, and most people, scholars and other people, sociologists agree, is because never in the history of the world has there been a people like us who have had as many choices as we do in life. You see, in the story, one of the reasons why Solomon needs wisdom is simply because he has two choices. Which woman is right, and which one is telling the truth, and which one is lying. Which one is the actual mother, and which one is not. Now, it might sound stupid, right? So obvious to point this out, like, duh, Solomon has choices, you need wisdom. You know why you think that way? And you're like, it's because we live in a world where two choices is not even choice. Everything you do is like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 choices. Did you know that? And then when you add in the fact that throughout the most of history, and even now, there are cultures and customs and people groups where making decisions is not much of a thing in their life, then you realize how weird the world that we live in is. Think about it. For the most of history, and even now with certain cultures, did you know that all of their big decisions were not decisions, it was just made for them? For instance, in history, and again, in cultures in some third world countries, where does someone live? It's where you were born. It's where your parents are from. You don't move. If you move, they go, what are you doing here? Go back to your hometown. What career or job do you have? If you're a man back in the days, in history, or again, even certain cultures, how did you choose what you did? What your father did. It's simple. You just do what your daddy did. If you're a woman, sorry to break it to you, you're a mother. That's what your job is in these traditional cultures. You don't have a choice. Speaking of mother and wife, who do you end up marrying? You don't date. Someone tells you who to marry and when. Those choices are not choices. They're just things that are decided for you and not by you, by somebody else. And so because of these large life decisions are already made for you, you don't have a choice, most of those people also don't make smaller choices either. It's just a fact of life. What you wear, what you eat, what you do, pretty much all decided by where you lived, who your father was, and who you're married to. But us now? I mean, whenever I tell you about society, it's like when I tell you, you're like your heart is like shrinking and dying inside, right? You're like, ooh. Life now, what is it if not a never-ending stream of choices? And not only that, doesn't it seem like life's goal is to provide ourselves and our loved ones with as many choices as humanly possible? Right? To not have limits, to throw off all the limits and make sure I have everything available to you? This may be surprising, but I think there are some people in the world who would literally love to get into every college they apply to. It would make them feel good. Like, look at all these colleges that want me. I look at it and I shrivel. I'm like, how do you even decide with all those choices? Let me give you a really silly example, but it's going to hit home. You know what would happen if I took someone from a rural area, right, like undeveloped, third world or whatever, or someone from history, and then I took them to Katy Asian Town to go grab a cup of boba? They would pass out because they'd be like overwhelmed. The fact that you're not reacting proves my point. Here's why. When you go to a boba shop and you don't know anything about it, this is what you got to go through. First, you got to decide, what kind of a drink am I going to get? Is it going to be hot or cold? Then you got to decide, is it going to be tea-based, fruit-based, milk-based? Then you got to decide, well, if I'm going that way, is it going to be a slushy or blended or just shaken? Then you got to decide, wait, is it green tea, oolong tea, honey oolong tea, jasmine tea, and then all the mango jasmine, mango green, whatever. Then after you decide that, okay, oh, toppings. Oh, is it boba? No, mini boba. No, golden boba. No, grass jelly? No, lychee jelly. No, those things that pop in your mouth that has 10 different flavors of all the fruits, I don't even know what they're called. Those things. Then after that, you think you're done? You're not. How much ice would you like? I don't know, just give me ice. No, you got to tell me what ice you want. Is it half? 60%? 70%? Light? Is light half? Is it 70% and 60%? I don't know. Just give me some. No. Okay, now you're done. No, you're not done. How much sugar? Full? Light? Half? What's the difference? I don't know. Just choose one. 70, 60, and every shop is different, the scale that they use. And you're still not done. Would you like milk foam or salty cheese foam? Then after that, is it capped or sealed? What's the difference? It's sealed, by the way, so you can shake it up and then pop your straw in it. Capped is the I don't know, like that. Anyway, whatever. My favorite drink is from T-Top. You know what it is? Alpine green tea with taro balls. 50% sugar, 50% ice. Not the salty cheese foam, regular milk foam, sealed. Make that mistake all the time. If it comes capped, you're doomed. You can't shake it. Just gotta stir the stupid thing. That's too much to get one drink. And the fact that it costs you $8 is just a travesty. For all the work you do, it should cost less. Never before in our lives have we had so many choices. Like, actually, it'd be kind of nice if you only had two. But like two, is that even a choice? Like, seriously, what are we doing here? But if that were not enough, sometimes it gets worse. I know, it gets worse. Because sometimes, actually with boba, one thing I'm glad is there are some things that'll help you to make those choices, by the way. You may not make the right choices, but there are things that'll help you. For instance, sugar levels, get less sugar. It's good for you, better for you. What drink you get, if you've already had 2 cups of coffee, for the adults, don't get caffeinated tea. Little ones, don't get the caffeinated tea. Get the fruit stuff with less sugar and less ice, so it's not too icy. But we don't follow those things. But at least there are some things to help us regulate. But what happens when the choices are identically equal? Then it's just a madhouse, isn't it? And that's what we have with Solomon. The reason why his wisdom is extraordinary here is because what he has before him is two equally similar women, at least on the surface. Have you ever heard this phrase, a fork in the road? It's when you're going down one road and all of a sudden the road splits randomly. You're like, what the? And no matter what you do, the road looks exactly the same. One goes left and one goes right. Now you know in your heart that what one leads to and the other one leads to, you don't know where they lead, so they can be different, but to you and what you can see in that very moment, they're identical. And you're like, what in the world and where do I go? What do you do at a fork in the road? Solomon is at a fork in the road. Two women, both harlots, both claiming that this baby is theirs. And unfortunately, there's nothing that helps Solomon make this choice. There are no laws or rules that regulate this choice. In every society, there are laws. We know this, and the laws help us. For instance, you shouldn't kill somebody. Why? Because it's mandated by law. That's not wisdom. Just follow the law. But also in society, there are rules. We call them social norms or cultural customs that help you to make decisions. For example, if the two women in front of Solomon weren't two women, but a man and a wife, that would make Solomon's decision a lot easier. Certain cultures, they give it to the woman. Why? Because women in certain cultures, like ours, are deemed better child takers or caretakers, right? In other societies, they might give it to the man. Why? Because the man have power, man have money, right? And that's kind of how it works. They have power and money and women, anyways. Or let's say the two women were not equal, but they were differentiated by economic status. One was rich and one was poor. Who do you give it to? The rich person. Why? The rich person has more resources to take care of the child. Or if the two women were not two harlots, not two prostitutes, but one was a prostitute, the other one was a career woman, whatever creed you want to choose, who are they giving it to? The regular career woman. Why? Because the environment in which the baby is going to grow up is better. You don't want to have a baby grow up in a prostitute house, right? Simple. Or sometimes in the court of law, hopefully you have witnesses that corroborate evidence. If one of them had a witness and the other one didn't, then it'd be easy. But as you see in the situation, it is made abundantly clear it's two harlots from the same house who had babies days apart, so you can't tell which one is bigger or whatever. Oh, this one is clearly not your baby because this one's born 2 months earlier. None of that. It's literally, she said, she said. That's why Solomon repeats it. One of you telling me this is your son, the other one telling me it's your son. There's no way to decide. It's literally a fork in the road. When do you need wisdom? At forks in the road. And if you're following the train of thought from earlier, never in the history of the world have a people faced more forks in the road than you and me. And then parents, older people, let me tell you, never in the history of the world have a group of people like our young people faced as many forks in the freaking road like them. Going and getting into college when I was younger was much easier. Let me just tell you that right now. I'm 40. Way easier. I don't want to go to college right now. It would drive me insane. So what do? You have to have wisdom. And on top of that, again, as I said, it'd be nice if the fork only had two choices. The forks that we deal with, particularly younger people, there's 5, 6, 7 choices. How many colleges? As many as you like. How many jobs? Hopefully multiple. More the better. When you make a decision on who to date, before it was literally like, date this person or not this person. This time it's like hundreds as you swipe through the dating apps. When do we need wisdom? Literally all of the time. Never has wisdom been more important than today. So then, if we know that wisdom is important and we need it all the time, then where does one get it? Look at verse 16 with me. It says, then 2 women who were harlots came to the king and stood before him. May sound like a simple sentence. It's not. Here's the reason why this is important. The reason why the 2 women are in front of Solomon is because in those societies where kings reign and you have emperors and ultimate sources of power like dictators or whatever, in all those societies, the one thing that combines them all and is similar with all of them is that the king de facto, the ruler de facto, the ultimate authority de facto is expected to be the wisdom. Oh, went too far. It's why they're in front of the king. But then you might go, well, Pastor Peter, we don't live in that society. We don't have a king. So what do we do? Well, in societies without kings, though we may not have a king, what the Bible teaches us is absolutely clear. Is that though we may not have a physical king, a person who is the ruler and king, therefore supposed to be authority, make no mistake about it. Everyone, without a single exception, this is the slide, has a Lord. Everyone has a ruling authority. Everyone has an ultimate guiding principle. Everyone has something that dictates their life, whether you like it or not. Some will call it a rule of life. Others will call it an ultimate goal, whatever. But make no mistake, every single human being has a Lord and lives according to it, him, her, or whatever. Let me give you some examples. For some, it's money. And if it's money, it has interesting impact in your life. If it's money, let's say you have 2 job offers. And one of them you know is better for you, at least how you're going to feel, your passions, your goals in life. You're going to like it, you're going to enjoy it, right? It's going to be fulfilling to you. And the other one clearly isn't that. You're going to hate it. You already know it. It's not according to your passions, right? But you know you can do it, and it's something that you can do, yada, yada, yada. But this one over here that fits your passions pays $30,000 less, and this one pays $30,000 more. If money is your Lord, which one? It's easy. Come on. Choose the one with more money. Let's say your king or Lord is status and or prestige. And again, you have 2 colleges. You got into both of them. One over here is, let's say, closer to home, which is important to you. Texas for life. The campus has a church that you can go to, which is important to you. The weather is nicer. For me, it's got to be sunny and warm. I hate cold. No snow, please. But the other is far away. You don't really know a church. Maybe, probably not. And it's frigid for months of the year because it's in a cold weather place. But this one is here on your home state. And this one is Ivy. Which one do you go to? If status and prestige are king, that's an easy one. You don't blink. Go to this one. I mean, I don't have to tell it to you. There are countless examples where this exists. But the point is, every single person has wisdom, and we get our wisdom from our kings. And we see this in the example with Solomon and the 2 women. The brilliance of this wisdom is that Solomon is able to very quickly identify and get the women to reveal to him who their kings are. Right? The situation is literally blanket same. There's no way to tell which one is which and who's lying. So Solomon exercised wisdom, and all of a sudden he says, surprisingly, he goes, hey, give me a sword. Okay? King, sword. He goes, I got an easy solution. Let's just cut the baby in half, and each of you can have a baby. Now, when you and I read it, you're like, what in the world? Someone even questioned, like, is Solomon stupid? Like, I thought he was supposed to be wise. Like, what in the world is he doing? But it's brilliant, even though it's outrageous and sounds crazy. Here's why. For one, Solomon has no intention of killing the baby, because he's the wisest person in the world. That's not a wise thing, so he wouldn't do it. But more importantly, we know that Solomon has no intention of killing the baby, because when the one woman says, hey, you know what? Yeah, go ahead and kill the baby, he's not shocked. That's what he was waiting for. He knew exactly what he was doing by bringing the sword. It's the sword and the response to it, therefore, that reveals the true kings for the women. When it was confronted to the one woman of the prospect of dividing the baby, one woman clearly shows who her king and Lord is. It's motherhood for that woman. Kill the baby. That way, neither she nor I am going to be a mother. If I can't be a mother, she for sure can't be a mother. She's so unhappy that her quote-unquote peer or rival could be a mom and she can't. She'd rather the baby die so neither can. Have you met people like that? Are you like that? If I can't have it, you can't have it. If parenting is your king and Lord, people in the room, the Bible shows us all the time, you will destroy your children because it's not about them. It's about you as parent. I mean, anyone who reads the story, I think will react the same way if you're normal and sane. When the woman's like, yeah, go ahead and split the baby in half. We all know, dude, that woman is crazy. That's selfish. That's foolish. We all know. We can feel it deep in our bones, can't we? And anyone would clearly know. It doesn't take a rocket science to figure out that she is clearly not the mother. She's clearly not fit to be a mother either. But what we know for sure is that she's willing to do anything to protect her motherhood, even if it means destroying someone else's. Where do you get your wisdom? It's from your Lord. Everyone's got one. Which one is it? Well, then once you've identified where your king is, then we got to figure out how do we get true wisdom. You may notice the difference. It says true wisdom now, just regular wisdom. As I said, what's important is not whether you are wise or foolish. It's whether the wisdom you have is wise or whether the wisdom you have is foolish. And Solomon here, again, in a brilliant move, reveals not only the wisdom of the mothers, but also the difference between worldly wisdom and the wisdom of God, right? We told you that there's a distinction between the two, between false wisdom, aka world wisdom, and true wisdom, aka God's wisdom. Notice the difference between the 2 women. The one with the world's and therefore false wisdom, you know what she does? She forcefully reaches at all costs to try to grab the thing that she wants, and in the end, she loses it. Did you see that? Get it at all costs. Nothing can stand in my way. No matter what, to all ends, I'm going to get the thing that I want. And she loses it. But did you see the other woman? The one with God's and therefore true wisdom? She gives it away. And then she ultimately gets it back, doesn't she? If you read throughout Scripture, you'll see this all over the place. God's wisdom, which is, as we read in 1 Corinthians, foolishness to the world, is like this. God's wisdom says the way up is down. The way to find your life isn't to search deep within, isn't to whatever. No, the way to find your life is to lose it. The way to get power that doesn't never fade, that you can't lose, that's eternal, is to submit to a greater power. The way to get rich, riches that will not fade or rust or decay, is to give away. For the mother who understood the true wisdom, she willingly gives up her motherhood so that the child can have life and joy. And in the end, because she's willing to sacrifice, she gets the thing she was willing to lose. That's true wisdom. And the problem that we all have is we don't like it, do we? How do we get true wisdom? Well, the story tells us, oftentimes in Scripture, did you know wisdom is tied to a sword? That if you really want to know who your wisdom is or what your wisdom is, often a sword is the thing that reveals who our true Lord is. Oftentimes it's only a sword that's going to reveal whether you and I understand that giving up is the way to gain. I told you that we're going to be looking at Abraham next week and onward. You probably know where this is going. The story of Abraham and Isaac, that's how we finish the whole thing. That won't be 4 months from now, but you know the story, right? The son that Abraham long waited for, that God promised, that he thought he was never going to get, that finally God blessed him with. He went through a whole lot of junk to get that son, let me tell you. And we'll find out soon. And then what does God do? Hey, give it up. Kill him. Literally puts a sword in his hand. What does Abraham do? Takes the sword, and he's about to do it. Now, I'm just going to be real with you. I'm a human being. I would love to tell you that I have all the confidence in the world that if I was Abraham, I would do the same thing. Let's just be honest. I have no idea. You have no idea. You ain't never been in that situation, neither have I. I got kids. They're sitting right there. Sorry, Mason, I apologize. Put Mason on the thing and then slice him in half and then burn his body up in an offering. Yeah, that sounds real wise, don't it? In life, I think what you're going to learn is that sometimes it takes the sword to reveal what your true king is. And with Abraham, if he doesn't take the sword, it shows him clearly that it's not God who is his king. It's the promise that God made that is his king, aka his son. It's not the promise giver, the one who gives life, that is his king. It is the promised son. And with it, he would have been enslaved to that son for the rest of his life. With us, I think it's often going to be a sword, church. That God often is going to put a sword over our favorite things. The things that can ultimately and most easily and readily be our ultimate thing. At the youth retreat, Pastor Isaac from Jersey taught us that one of the major, if not the major scheme of the devil that we need the armor of God for is to do what? Students, tell me. Take a good thing and make it an ultimate thing. Take good things and make them your true and ultimate Lord. And the sword, oftentimes, the only way you'll really know is when the sword comes and says, show me what is really your true Lord. If you know my story, when I first moved to Houston, my family got taken away for 1.5 years almost. I had to do some contemplating. Do I leave this city that God called me to, or do I go back home because my family's there? It don't seem like they're coming. You put a sword over it, oh, you'll know where your heart is at. Quick and fast. Sometimes the sword is going to be over the good things in our lives that will ultimately become the ultimate things. And the woman shows us brilliantly how to handle it. That although it was difficult, she sacrifices, she gives up, and she's willing to lose. And the thing she does, we cannot kind of underplay it, okay? Think about it. If Solomon listened to her, just think this in mind. If she goes, you know what? Keep the baby alive and give it to her, right? You know what she's got to live through the rest of her life? Every single day in that house, she's got to watch this other woman raise her son, even though she knows that that woman murdered her child by accident by laying on it and then took hers in the middle of the night. Imagine watching that every single day. You'd rather die, if we're being honest. But she gives it up because she understood that sacrifice is the true wisdom to get that which you cannot gain on your own. Solomon understood this too. Yeah, we miss this, but Solomon's hearing a case by two prostitutes. If that word isn't strong enough, I apologize to young ones, two whores if you want. Why? He doesn't have to. He's a king. Actually, he shouldn't. The wise thing to do is not listen to this case. Why? Because listening to a case between these two questionable women, we'll call them that, is a risk to his honor, his reputation, and all that, but he does it. Why? Because he knows that's the way of the king, the true king, God. And what happens? He listens to them, and all of Israel is in awe. It's the same type of word as fear of the Lord. They fear and revere him because of his wisdom. How do we get wisdom? You got to figure out who your king is, and then follow the true king. Now you might be like, well, Pastor Pete, why should I follow Jesus? If you're not a Christian in the room, why should I follow Jesus? Why should I believe you that he's the ultimate king and he's the best wisdom and I should actually have him and not something else? Not money, not status, not prestige, not success, not anything, not family. Here's why. Every other king in the world outside of Jesus can die. Jesus cannot. Every other lord in the world can be defeated. Jesus cannot. But it gets better. If that's not enough for you, every other lord in the world will ask you for your life. He, our King Jesus, gives his life so that you and I don't have to give it up. The woman says to the king, King, don't split him in half, split me in half. I'll undergo the torture of watching this other woman raise my child for the rest of my life if it means that this one can have life. The only one that does that in the world is Jesus. Split me in half, Lord. Kill me on the cross. Punish me for all the sin of the world so that they don't have to take it. And you know what he gets? Not only his life back, but all of ours for eternity. That's true wisdom, isn't it? So here are some practical things that you might want to do to get wisdom. First, ask yourself. Be brutally honest when you do. Who is my true king? At the retreat, the students were asked to make a list. What are the ultimate goods in your life? Number them. Is God really, truly number one, or where does he fit? Have you ever done anything like that? You don't have to raise your hand. Just think about it. You should. It reveals a lot. If you just try to put God number one if he isn't number one. It sucks. It's like your hand shakes because you know in your heart you're lying on paper and God can... Ask yourself, who is your true king? Because don't get it twisted, make no mistake. When the sword comes, and it might, you'll know who it is. And if it ain't God in that moment, it's not going to be good news. Then second, as you ask yourself, then pray. AKA ask God to reveal to you, help you to be honest with yourself, to reveal who the true king is, even if it means, Lord, taking out the sword. My idol before I came to Houston was my family. I'm a PK. I was told that my kids were going to be messed up because they're PKs. And I said, no, never. I'm going to raise them exactly this way. They're going to be perfect and yada, yada, yada. And you know what I ended up becoming? I ended up becoming worse, making them my idol. And then God took it away and said, who are you going to follow, me or your family? Ask God to reveal this to you, even if it means taking out the sword. Then third, embrace the sword. You know why? Because the sword is the cross. The sword is the thing that slaughters our Savior. The cross is the thing that shows us what indeed true life is. You know what Jesus says? He goes, if you want to follow me, what? Deny yourself. That's a sword. And then pick up your cross, aka crucify that self you just denied. That's a sword. And then you come follow me. Then you'll know how life is meant to be lived. And then after you've done those three things, if you make it that far, I hope, then 4, you start living out the cross and the wisdom of God. How? Let me give you a few examples. Do you know why pastors tell you to read your Bible? It's not because it's like what a good Christian does. How else are you going to know about your true king if not reading the source? That's why you read the Bible. Because this is where you find out who your true king is. You pray. Do you know why we ask you to pray? Again, it's not what good Christians do. How else are you going to spend time with the one who is your true king? And if you don't spend time with the one who's your true king, you'll never know this true king. Makes sense? And also in the world, if you don't spend time with the true king, you'll be spending time with another king. Do you know why we ask you to be a part of small groups? It's not because we're trying to report some statistic. It's because in small groups is where you can indeed be loved, but also love others. Become vulnerable and be vulnerable with others. Sacrifice and serve others. Be accountable to others. It's how the community works. It's what you're supposed to do. It's where you see if indeed you believe that the way up is actually down. The way to gain is to actually give. The way to live is to actually serve. And then lastly, as you do, then serve. Oh, I say one more. After that, go on missions. Tied the same. Do you know why we ask you to serve? It's not because we need help or whatever. Jesus makes it clear, it's better to give than to receive. That's the wisdom of him and not the world. You serve and you finally see whether you're willing to give away yourself for the good of another or whether yourself is the king above the other. Right? The 2 great commandments, love the Lord with everything that you have, and then what? Love your neighbor more than yourself. That's why. So we don't pretend that we are indeed who we are, that we are living by the wisdom we're supposed to be when we're not. And then lastly, then you go on mission. Why? Because then you can actually see if the people who are dying without salvation in the world actually mean what they're supposed to mean to you. If doing for these little or the least of these actually means something to you because you know you're doing it for the Lord. Church, I began the sermon and the announcements by saying, hey, you know what? Our young people, they need us more than ever. They need people who have wisdom because they're getting it from somewhere else. But as a church, can we indeed find our true source of wisdom, live by it, show the world, be salt and light that we're living by the true wisdom? And then when it's difficult, because it will be, we rely on one another, we pray with one another, we read scripture together, we study together, we live life together, and indeed we will do so, and then you'll have the true wisdom. And for doing so, you'll have life. So will you find it? Will you want it? And then will you go get it? Ask him, and indeed he shall reveal to you. Will you take some time and respond? I know, a lot, but I think it's worth it. Take some time to respond, dig deep, ask questions, pray, and then we'll sing as the praise team lead us in a little bit.